think that for my generation, it's getting difficult, more difficult to hone in into that longer term perspective, just because, like we discussed previously, we're very like my generation, we're very drawn into the instant gratification of things, getting immediate results. Also, again, we see how all of our peers are doing quote unquote better than us in 1 second. Like we're all the time we're seeing all of these things happening so fast. And so on your perspective, Kevin, how can I myself, how can I really harvest, how can I really build that longer perspective on a personal level?
That's a good question. How do you get the longer perspective? For one of the things that helped me was reading a lot of history. If you read history and you go back, you understand a little bit more about the longer term, the lower frequencies that are governing the world, and you see kind of the momentum that things have, and you see the things like religious beliefs and other things that are slower moving. And so for me, that has really helped thinking about the future in long term, is to have more and more of a sense of history, more and more of an immersion into how weird the past was, which will help us to prepare for the weird things coming into the future. And so I think that is an important thing. Immerse yourself in history. And the second thing I think that helps is, actually, I think having children helps, because then you're forced to begin to be thinking of other generations, future generations. Work with children if you don't have some. And I think that's, understanding that most of the people in the world have yet been born. All right? There's going to be more people in the future than there have been in the past. And so there is this idea of our obligation to them, our being a good ancestor. So I think working with kids and hanging around young people is another thing to do besides history. And then cultivating that long term, I think it's just a very deliberate skill. It's like anything else. It's like going to the gym or studying for exams. I think you can, one, become more optimistic. You can choose to be more optimistic, and I think you can also develop the skill of taking a longer term view of things, understanding that, looking at things in terms of decades, multi-decades, rather than quarters. You can still do the quarters. You need to act on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
But you want to be thinking in terms of decades and centuries. And so I think it's, I think you can choose to do that.
Like you say, like you write in Excellent Advice for Living, the most important rule that we should try to create in our lives and follow is the golden rule. That also applies for future generations.
Yes.
The golden rule with them. And so here's where I admire you a lot, Kevin, because history has shown us that, nature, humanity, us between us, and, all of the external factors as well as the internal can be really brutal. Like history has shown us that history has been brutal. And what I admire from you is that you're a very optimistic person,
Yeah.
and you try to encourage that. And so how do you extract the optimistic side of the optimistic insights from history and boil it down for the present moment, Kevin?
So I think, let's talk about history. I think one of the reasons why you should read history is to get a very evidence-based education on the reality of our own progress. So this is, Steven Pinker and others. Like, if you take an impartial view of history, you have to acknowledge how we are so much better off than in any previous time in history. So we have made our world better. And I would go so far as say we as animals, as hominids, as primates, we've invented our own humanity. It was the first animals we domesticated were ourselves. So we have invented our humanity, and we're still inventing it. And if you look in a very unbiased scientific way, you have to agree that the best year to be alive as a human is 2024. If you take it statistically, globally, if you could not choose how you're going to be born, whether you're going to be born male, female, slave, or whatever, the only year you want to be born is this year, right? Because any other year in history would have been pretty tough as a random human somewhere in the world. And so part of being an optimist has to begin with the acknowledgement of the reality of progress in our own lives. As bad as sometimes a day may seem, if you read history, you realize that compared to what has been, it's just better now. Overall, there's tremendous problems, but the problems of the past were even worse. So, and that's true politically, that's true economically, that's true socially. We have made progress. That's the beginning of being able to be optimistic about the future, is thoroughly absorbing that reality. And so, there's a lot of disagreement about the plus and benefits, but again, if you take a very objective view of the world, looking at everything from health, longevity, rights, opportunities.